And for more on this, we can bring in our international affairs editor, Douglas Herbert. Doug, this is clearly the ceasefire is over, but where can we go from here?
Things could get a lot worse, not because I'm saying it, but because the Israelis have clearly stated that they are, Benjamin Netanyahu saying that he plans on increasing the military pressure. The defense minister basically saying that these strikes will continue as long as necessary right now until the hostages are released. So we are right now back in that very horribly familiar, all too familiar pattern of the prospect of sort of an unlimited war with little incentive right now for either side to go back to the ceasefire conditions, from January. Look, let's be clear here. Benjamin Netanyahu had public reservations about this ceasefire from the get-go, from the very start. He never really directly wanted to deal with the mediators in Qatar, the US, Egypt, and Qataris themselves. He preferred to go directly to first the former Biden administration and then to Trump themselves to basically get his red lines drawn, to basically make it clear to the United States that at the slightest provocation or what he could perceive or present from the Israeli side as a provocation or a violation of the ceasefire would be able to resume the war. And that is exactly what we're seeing today. So for him, the go-to interlocutor has always been the United States. And let's also be clear. He knows that since the transition from Biden to Trump, he has had a man in the White House ready to do his bidding and perhaps then some. Trump is the original president during his first term, let's not forget, who moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. And in this term, he grabbed headlines across the world by coming up with some sort of plan to turn Gaza into the, quote, Riviera of the Middle East by relocating, expatriating up to 2 million or more Palestinians to other countries, Egypt and Jordan, who basically dismissed those plans, saying that's not happening. Now looking at other places to relocate them. So this was manna from heaven for Benjamin Netanyahu coming from Washington, more than he ever got or could have hoped for from the Biden administration. So when you ask, are we back to where we were? Absolutely. And not only were we back to where we were before the ceasefire, but we're back there, you could argue, almost with a freer hand for Benjamin Netanyahu, at least in terms of where Washington stands with respect to the way he is waging this war.
Now, the White House confirmed that it had been consulted by Netanyahu before the attacks. The Trump administration gave it its blessing, but probably even more so. It did seem to be quite enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, the Trump administration has, through its spokesperson, first of all, Caroline Leavitt, has made it clear that, she also mentioned the Houthis, against whom the U.S. also has launched missile and drone strikes in recent days, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, that is, another Iran proxy, in addition to Hamas, basically saying, if these people in any way continue to, as she put it, terrorize, this is the White House spokesperson, terrorize Israel or the United States, they will have a price to pay. And then, quoting Trump, all hell will break loose. That is a line that Donald Trump has sort of an ultimatum he has delivered to Hamas time and time again. So the line from the White House very much is an absolute, almost verbatim lockstep from what we have heard from Israel itself. And in a sense, if you're to make the case that right now Benjamin Netanyahu has shored up, essentially, his support from his right-wing extremist coalition, a coalition that wanted nothing to do from the outset with this ceasefire deal, that from the very beginning said that this was absolute folly, any sort of talk of a ceasefire, unless Hamas were first militarily and politically annihilated. You could say that Washington right now is very much adhering to that same exact line. So supporting this, what you might argue, is Benjamin Netanyahu ensuring his political survival. But then the question that begs, both with respect to Benjamin Netanyahu's now policy and Washington's consent to this policy, is how Israelis are going to react at home and whether or not this could end up backfiring in his face, especially if the hostage families, as we see, are going to mount more and more protests to demand. They're demanding a meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu for today, members of the Hostage Families Forum, to basically ask him, how are you going to ensure that we get the remaining hostages home given the fact that we have now your government has now resumed fighting, how can you ensure their safety under the current conditions of an increasing military operation against Hamas? That's an outstanding question. How Israeli society is going to respond also remains to be seen.
Thank you very much for that, Douglas Herbert.